Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Indie Game Movement, the podcast that talks about the marketing and business of indie games. I'm Andrew Pappas, going to be your host today, and this is episode 251, and we're kicking off season 2 with how to properly market to cultural audiences. Now, some people may think that marketing to cultural audiences only involves partnerships and localizing your game. But to really cater and serve that audience, it starts with having a core understanding and how to best represent those people. That's why today, Osama Dorias shares his experiences and understanding of global gaming culture and how applying empathy and taking certain approaches can create numerous opportunities while better serving your audience. So that's what we're going to be talking about right here today on Indie Game Movement. Hey everyone, and we're back, and today I have such a great guest with me too that I'm very happy because I've been talking with this awesome guy for a while now, and I finally got him on the show, and it's Osama Dorias. Hey buddy, thank you so much for being here on the show with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Andrew. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, before we get into anything, I just want to take a moment for you to introduce yourself, what you have done for the games community, what you do for work, and also just please take a moment and share any fun activities, hobbies, or things you do when you have spare time.
Absolutely. Okay, so my name is Osama Dorias, as you said. I'm the lead game designer at WB Games in Montreal, currently working on Gotham Knights. I also teach game design at Dawson College. I'm the co-founder of the Montreal Independent Game Awards. We took a break because of COVID, but hopefully we'll be back soon. I'm no longer the co-director. I'm involved in the Game Awards, but that has passed on to other people. I do other things as well. I'm the chair of the Muslim Games Special Interest Group for the IGDA, the International Game Developers Association. I've been involved in game jams and workshops. I was part of Game Loop, which is a gaming event. I mentor for a whole bunch of different associations, usually related around video games, but not always. So I'm active. I'm involved in the community, and I'm happy to be so. In terms of personal things and hobbies, I love to pick up new hobbies. I don't always keep with them. Currently, I've really had a lot of fun cooking.
Okay.
Coming up with I just recently I've made butter chicken that's to die for. I made coconut shrimp curry that was delicious. Different things. So I've been experimenting with that. Also picked up biking after a long time of not biking. I got a nice bike and just go around town, different locations, and having a lot of fun with that. And I'm thinking about picking up a musical instrument again. It's been a while. I used to play a little bit of guitar, a little bit of keyboard, and I miss it. So we'll see. My consistent hobby has been I make video games and board games with my kids. I love doing that. We make them together. They are the target audience. They're the creative leads. I'm kind of there just to make sure the rules work. So yeah, that's me.
That's awesome. I love here now I'm hungry, but
I'm sorry.
It's all right. It's funny. I think a lot of people have been kind of picking up a few more things lately. I mean, obviously COVID is part of that, but just in general, myself, I've been really into trying to make my own Caesar dressing, traditional Caesar dressing from scratch. It's been a trip to get it right. But anyways, your stuff sounds way more interesting than a salad dressing. But no, that's really cool. But more importantly, just the type of activities and things that you have been doing with the community is just awesome to hear. And in a moment, it's a little bit of why we're here today to have this discussion. But before we get into that, and again, thank you so much for sharing that. And plus, the stuff with the kids sound amazing. I might need to do that sometime actually with my kids because, but I don't know if they're ready to because let's just say they have a limited attention span. But it's probably good to try that out sometime. I
Well,
like your.
after the podcast, if you'd like to talk about it, I got my kids started when they were 3 and 5. So I believe you can even, and they had very low attention spans as well. I have a couple of pointers if you want to hear about it.
All right, I am down. So cool. All right, but as I mentioned, there's some cool things that we want to talk about around some of Osama's background. But before we get to that, we're going to go through the Q Box round. And for those of you who aren't familiar, Q Box round is just a series of random questions I prepared to ask Osama. So, Osama, are you ready to enter the Q Box round?
I'm ready.
All right. Crayons, colored pencils, or Sharpies?
Colored pencils, they're versatile. They're good at drawing outlines and coloring in between them.
Ah, nice. What was your childhood favorite game?
I'd say Street Fighter 2. I started playing it with my brothers and sisters at a very young age, and I never stopped.
Nice. Uh, if you could be any Power Ranger, what would it be?
It's a funny question because actually, I'm probably older than you think. Power Rangers was a thing that kind of got started when I was already in my late teens, so I never really got into it. I don't think I've ever seen a full episode. So judging on aesthetics only, I'd say Green Ranger, but I have no idea what's behind the mask.
Yeah, that's funny. I think I would go with Green or White Ranger, and I don't know. I think with me myself, I never really watched Power Rangers either. My sister did for some odd reason.
Yeah, my sister and my brother did as well. They were younger. Yeah, I was more of a Ninja Turtles generation.
Yep, same here. There you go.
Yeah, and Transformers before that.
Nice. What's one thing that motivates you every day?
The desire to make things better for the next generation, whether that's like for my kids or my students or like juniors getting into the games industry, just making things better than what I had to go through.
Nah, nice. And what game are you playing right now?
I'm playing the Mass Effect Legendary Edition.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, I've played all three Mass Effects in the past. I'm a fan, but I'm not what you would call a super fan because I played them once, and my memory of the games is really fuzzy now. So when they announced the Legendary Edition, I was super excited to refresh my memory.
Oh, sweet. You know what game I needed to do that with is the original Resident Evil, because I knew that game front, back. I like studied the player's guide and everything and beat it under 2 hours so I could get infinite ammo with the rocket launcher.
That's incredible.
So I'd love to visit that one again. But no, that's
a good
awesome.
choice. Yeah, the remaster has like really good reviews. I haven't played it yet either. It's on my list.
Oh yeah, I need to check that out. But I
played the original. Like I played the original as well, and but not a super fan like you are. I just really liked it at the time. It's fuzzy in my memory. I have to go back and play it again.
Yeah, but
I am a super fan of a lot of older games, just not those two.
Yeah. But I unfortunately I haven't played any of the Mass Effects, and I know, but at some point
it's okay. I don't judge. There are a lot of games that come out. We do not have time to play all the good games out there. It's impossible, especially now more than ever.
Oh yeah.
But this is your chance to pick it up. It's a masterpiece. The first game is the worst of the three, in my opinion. Everyone has different opinions, but it's the hardest one to get through. But with the changes in the Legendary Edition, I think it'll be easier for people playing it for the first time.
Sweet. Well, good to know. All right. Well, thank you so much for going through the Q Box round and sharing a little bit more interesting side of your background and everything from a very random perspective. So, all right, cool. Well, now we're going to get into our core topic today, and that is how to properly market to cultural niches. Now, specifically, though, I wanted to define this a little bit more because, when it comes to marketing, right, and you've heard on the time and time again on this show is knowing your audience. So that's kind of what I really want to focus this conversation off. And to kick that off, my question here is, basically the world has already become a global gaming culture. And because of this, it's more important than ever to think about the types of games we're creating and how we market them. So why is this so important to think about what we're creating for games?
So it's like, in my opinion, it's always been important. It's just something that was mostly overlooked. One thing to keep in mind is that whenever you grow up and live in an area, your view of what other areas do, especially other countries, is going to be extremely skewed. It
Mm.
was quite a while, not that long ago, actually, a few years ago, that I realized that fighting games, if you take them as an example, because I mentioned Street Fighter, I love fighting games.
Yep.
I've been
Yep.
playing them forever. They are not popular in the same regions as like their popularity in different regions varies greatly. Like I only heard about King of Fighters something like 10 years ago. I didn't even know it was a franchise that existed up until about 10 years ago. Now
Hmm.
I play it and it's a lot of fun. I was shocked to learn that in South America, King of Fighters in many areas was bigger than Street Fighter. Like historically, was bigger than Street Fighter. Um, Same thing with the Middle East and Southeast Asia when it comes to Tekken. Tekken was bigger than Street Fighter there.
Yep.
Mortal Kombat always felt like it was the challenger to Street Fighter. It's always Street Fighter versus Mortal Kombat. But no, Mortal Kombat is pretty big in North America, but it wasn't that big in other regions and other areas, depending on where you go. So just that, like depending where you grow up, your like a brand is very different, like how much space it takes up in your head and your in terms of its influence is varies wildly, where we could have some franchises that we've never heard of being more popular in other countries. We're kind of aware of what's popular in Japan. At least me growing up, like my age demographic, we always looked to see what games were popular there. And I did my fair share of importing games that didn't get released here, and the rest of the world was like a void. I had no idea.
Mm.
And it took me meeting people, like it took the internet, of course, to make it a little bit easier, but it took me meeting people from different parts of the world and asking about their experiences to realize how these games just had different breakthroughs in different places. And we're starting to see that now. Like, if you look at if you take fighting games as an example, you're starting to see games that were traditionally very popular in some areas only recently start including characters in their rosters from those areas they were popular in a long time ago. Like something happened just a little while ago where people woke up to that realization that hey, maybe people in those territories, maybe we could lean into representing them more. Maybe that'll make them, like lean into our games more. So we have like Shaheen and Arab, like Arab fighter from the Gulf in Tekken as an example, or Rashid in Street Fighter, and those are new additions. And other games have been like more recently doing that as well. Like I say more recently, it's been a few years, but Anna and Farah and Overwatch are really good examples of Arab representation there that I had never seen to that degree and to that fidelity before in a high production video game ever. And it's no coincidence that Overwatch is extremely popular right now in the Middle East, right? It's no coincidence
Mm.
that when you allow people to see themselves in a game, that they're going to gravitate to it. And moving a little bit away from, like I already moved away with Overwatch from fighting games, but if you take the example of League of Legends, the more recent character Samira is another step in that direction, where a game that was super popular in a region is finally getting someone who kind of looks like they could be from that region. So it's always been important. It's only been neglected, and I feel right now people are waking up to the fact that people like different things in different areas in different regions of the world. And if you have a more diverse, especially for games, all the games I've been giving as examples are games with rosters because that's an easy example. But if you give them options, whether that's a roster character or anything you could think of that fits your game, they're more likely to play your game, and that's what it's all about, right? For
Yeah.
marketing, it's all about having more people like engage in your content, and that's it.
Yeah, and you know what? I really like how you led in with that, the fighting game example, because it's just or anything essentially with a roster lineup, right? Because it's very defined in terms of like, hey, this is a format we're used to where there's a list of characters and what areas do these characters represent. I mean, when you were saying that, I was already envisioning the world map with Street
Yeah.
Fighter and like the plane going across to where you're gonna fight. you know,
Classic, exactly, traditional.
but
And it also works the other way. Like I didn't delve too much into it, but like from what I understand, and the Battlefield franchise has been historically more popular than the Call of Duty franchise in the Middle East and Southeast Asia.
Mm.
And one of the reasons for that is because even though they're both doing better now, Call of Duty was more notorious at misrepresenting people from those areas before, like literally setting an environment or a level in one country and having the language of a different country in it. Like things are that, yeah, yeah, like you read the signs and you're like, wait, I just don't get it. Like that's even if you don't go to the negative representation and at that angle, it's not even accurate representation. It's insulting at that level. All these games right now are doing better because there are advocates speaking out. They still fumble. We still get new games that, for example, they have text written in their game where the Arabic font comes from left to right instead of from right to left, so it's illegible. And nobody on the team, I guess, flagged it, and it just releases that way. But that kind of thing might not like means a lot to people in those regions who read it, because it's kind of like disrespectful, right? It's a sign of you don't care enough about us to do the basic minimum to get how our words are written right. So it's not just like it goes both ways. Like don't do the positive thing of representing us, but also don't do the negative thing of representing us poorly, and that's going to help in those regions, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's kind of it's funny and sad. Well, it's more or it's more upsetting, I should say, when you're talking about how like people are doing these things, creating these experiences and not necessarily like being in line, or definitely, and in some cases, definitely not being in line with just really showcasing what it should be. And you provide some key examples. A kind of funny take on this, though. I doubt anybody will ever watch this or remember it, and I just happen to remember this one scene. It's from Cannibal the Musical. I think it's from the same creators of South Park, but in that there's one scene, and this is clearly deliberate, but it still speaks to the point that you were making. The film takes place, and I think in the Wild West, so to speak, or Gold Rush and things like that. I'm sorry, and the main character comes across this Native American tribe. And he goes, what tribe is this? And he goes, the Nihonjin tribe. And Nihonjin translates to Japanese. And they hired all Japanese actors to play Native Americans because back then that was always a common thing, like misrepresentation type thing, type of stuff. But it was, I don't know why that called attention to that, but it was just really funny. But it was funny in kind of a stark contrast kind of way too, because like these are all things that we've been dealing with, like growing up, and we're continue to see that in the gaming culture too. But again, it's like going above and beyond as far as like how we're changing things. Like you said earlier, how we're really companies and game creators and everything are really seeing these things and providing a better understanding of that. And when you were talking about Call of Duty and the other games relating to that in terms of providing what that experience, it actually leads into my next question, and wanting to understand like what's real and relatable, right? Because that's really important aspect to what we're talking about here. So like sometimes when game creators are looking to provide realistic settings or relatable themes, even they can sometimes base this information off what appears to be common understanding, right? But how can assuming this potentially provide an unrealistic view, which can possibly have a negative impact on some cultures?
Yes. Okay. So one thing you have to be careful of is that even though there are a lot of topics that are relatable, a lot of times the approaches around those topics are very differently from region to region. I'll give an example from where I grew up. I grew up in Montreal, Canada, and I grew up watching both English television, which is a mixture of Canadian TV, but mostly it's American TV. We're neighbors up north. We get a lot of your TV shows, but also French TV, which is also a mixture of television from France, but mostly local from Quebec, the province where I'm from. So what I noticed is sometimes the same brand would have two ads, one in English and one in French, and the tone of the ads would be completely different. I noticed it at a young age, completely different based on whether it was French or English. One of the examples that stuck with me to this day is ads, and this was across all brands. Everybody understood this. Ads for cold medicine in English TV. a cold is treated as a serious thing. People are always like in pain. They have like
Yep.
nasal pain, and you see like there's stark reds that's superimposed on top of the people's nasal passages, and they're holding their heads because of a headache. The tone is very, this is bad and have this medicine. French ads often played funny music. It was lighthearted. It's like, oh, you have a cold, oh poor you. Here, take this, it'll make you feel better. That might sound like a small subtle difference, but it was huge, and it's because how you approach a topic within a culture or within a demographic is going to paint it. If for example you had a similar ad than the French ads, but towards an English audience, I would imagine like, colds are serious. What are you talking about? It's stopping me from work. It's hindering my life. You can't make fun of colds in this kind of setting. I just won't take your product seriously. While in French, it's like, it's just a cold. There are worse things out there. Both are right, and having a cold is a relatable thing. Like everybody in the world has a cold, but just the tone makes a big difference. So if you go in and you say, well, everyone has colds, we're going to make some like an ad and make it universal across everywhere, you're in for, if you don't do the legwork to see how the expectation from the region, you could be in for a rude awakening when people react one way or another towards it. So like I know it's subtle, but that's important. I could give another example, very very different example. This also stuck with me from a long time ago. Symbolisms are very important.
Mm.
This is not exactly in advertising, but it strikes home from someone who used to watch a lot of boxing. From when Muhammad Ali fought George Foreman in Zaire, and you're thinking, where is he going with this? the crowd were chanting Muhammad Ali's name. Like basically, he did a few things that are really strong lessons. He understood marketing himself better than Muhammad Ali understood marketing himself so well, more than many people do today. He actually visited Zaire early. He landed there early. He spent time with the people to get to know them, to understand their likes and dislikes. And he did one thing, is he represented himself as one of them, and that Foreman is this invading force. They're both American. Muhammad Ali and George Foreman are both American. They're both black. If anything, George Foreman's skin complexion looked closer to the people of Zaire than Muhammad Ali's. Muhammad Ali's is more fair-skinned. They should have had more superficially more reason to root for George Foreman, because they were just recently colonized by Belgium not too long ago. But Muhammad Ali presented Foreman just by being there early and speaking to them, seeing that how they reacted to like they still had strong feelings, understandably, for their colonizers. He represented George Foreman as someone who's from the colonizing force, and himself as one of them. And the other thing that George Foreman inadvertently did, which he didn't realize, he walked out of the plane with two German shepherds. And German shepherds in Zaire were used by the colonizing force to control the populace. So the people of Zaire had strong negative feelings towards German shepherds specifically, understandably, because they were used to oppress them. And that sealed the deal. Just that. Like, there's nothing wrong with German shepherds as a species of dog. No, having dogs is relatable, man's best friend, all that symbolism, except in that specific area, in that specific context, where George Foreman didn't know beforehand. He didn't show up early, and he didn't scout. He didn't come prepared. He just assumed people were going to be rooting for him, while Muhammad Ali did the legwork. And he got lucky on top of that, of course, because George Foreman kind of sealed the deal with the shepherds, with the German shepherds. But still, so even common understanding, even common shared relatable experiences that we all go through, something as simple as like the tone of your ads, or like the symbolism that it carries, can turn people against you, or the other way around. If you employ the right symbolism and the right tone, people could really come flocking to you. And I say this, of course, not as a marketing expert. Like a user experience expert. I'm a game designer. It's a little bit different, but I've worked with many people who deal with marketing, and I've spoken to a lot of people from around the world, and I've seen many such examples of that. So like I don't want to misrepresent myself, Andrew. You're the expert of marketing, not me.
Thanks. Well, I absolutely love that story you shared, and that's actually something I didn't know about Muhammad Ali in that particular fight. But I mean, it goes to show your point, and let's take it back to apply it to some games in this instance here, right? So. Muhammad Ali, he went there and what did he do? He got to know the people. He got to introduce himself, share a little bit more about him and everything. And at the essence, like again, how this relates to games, like, or were they going to help him win the fight? No, it's really, it comes down to between him and George Foreman, right? But there's a relatable, even probably a psychological aspect when you're making those types of connections with people. It like, you know, and even if he lost, like, what did he really achieve in the end, right? There, and that's why we talk about, like, on the show so many times about knowing your audience, and these are great examples that you could apply to what you're doing in terms of creating your game, designing your game. What is that ultimately that player experience about, and being mindful. I forgot who did it, but there was an article a while ago where this game creator, their game was heavily involved with spiders, right? But they're being mindful of people who have arachnophobia. So there's a mode of the game that it basically eliminates all the spiders from the game, because because they want to be mindful of their audience. They know, like, most people, whether they have arachnophobia or not, that, again, like you were saying, Osama, it's relatable. But some people have a much severe case
Reaction.
of, exactly, compared to others. So again, it's coming down to that concept and understanding of your audience, having the empathy for them and such. Now, another thing that you mentioned in that story, and this is why I like it so much, you mentioned about being authentic, right?
Yes.
And I want to apply this idea of being authentic, back to, like, game creators and devs and stuff, because I feel that sometimes game creators may want to provide a realistic and relatable experience for different cultures, but they may feel that they can't be authentic because they can't relate due to cultural differences, or basically, like, have imposter syndrome, right? So what's a good way devs can realize their vision without worrying about whether or not they're authentic?
Okay, so the number one thing is this is going to depend on the size. I know you work mostly primarily with indies, but even indies, they range in size of company.
Mm-hmm.
If you have someone as part of your workforce who is from that culture, and if they're willing, because that's extra labor that they'd have to sign up to do, if they're willing without being coerced into it, listen to them. Not just listen to them, but like, if you're trying to reach out to a target audience that's from the same culture as someone on your team, involve that person from the very beginning of the process. Actually listen to them and make sure that they're comfortable to speak out, because a lot of times you could say, oh, we had that person in the room, but everyone's talking over them and they don't feel like safe to speak and say, well, that thing that you're harping on about, that's a faux pas. But they don't want to be the negative voice in the room. So if nobody stops and makes room for them to speak, a lot of times they just won't speak. And by the way, this is not their responsibility. This is a bonus that if they do accept, this is a bonus that they're doing, and acknowledge it as that. Be thankful for it. It's not because that's extra labor that they have to do, and it's tiring, and it's in addition to their other job. They're not going to take a break from the other job, so you can't expect anybody from a background to want to be the representative for that background. So that's not it. But I'm just saying, make room for them. That's your first stop. If you don't have that, if your team is small, or you just don't have people from the target audience that you want to represent, you have to hire a consultant. There are no shortcuts to this. You're not going to be able to, even like in the example of Muhammad Ali that I used, where he went to Zaire and he spent time with them. That is not going to make him an expert.
Right.
That's not going to make anyone expert. Even if you're like, what, I spent a year in let's say even Italy, and I'm going to make a game based in Italy, but I spent a year there. I'm an expert now. That you're going to get subtle things wrong. You just will, because you're not going to be able to absorb a lifetime of experiences in that short time. So the shortcut around this is to hire a consultant, and I use the word hire loosely. Depending on the size of your indie team, you might not have the budget for it or not, but at least reach out and see if anyone's willing to consult with you. If you can afford it, definitely pay for it because that's labor. But if you can't afford it, don't just shy away and say, well, whatever, I'll wing it. See if you could at least find some volunteers on the internet. If you're like a one person indie dev team working out of your basement, I'm sure you can find people on the internet who are willing to answer some questions for you and to consult with you on a level. I've consulted without being paid because I'm not a consultant in that sense, but I've consulted for many indie games in the past where people are just like, hey, can we show you this, or can you read through this and let us know if we're really off base? And I'm a busy person, as I mentioned, who does a lot of things, and I know tons of other people who are equally busy and who will still say yes. So don't be shy to ask. You never know who's going to reply and accept. And of course, I don't do that with big companies because they can hire a consultant who's going to do it full time. But like, I answer questions from small devs all the time, and I know other people do as well. And really, that's really all there is to it. It's if you don't have that lived experience, there are no shortcuts. You need to find someone who has that lived experience. To be able to guide you, and that's the only way you're going to get authenticity. Anything else, and you're going to make something that's going to miss at some point. And the other part that I'm going to bring up again is make sure they're involved early in the process, because what I've seen so many times is like someone gets deep into it and say, okay, at the end we're just going to show it off and see if we did anything wrong, and that causes more cuts than you can imagine. Like you'll get advice from the consultant to remodel the character or to redo some animations or even to recast a voice actor or name it, because they're like, no, that's all wrong. You're going to have to redo this. And at the end, sometimes budgets get in the way and you're like, well, we can't redo it. So I guess we're just going to omit this part of their background or cut the character completely, or, or just make up a name and not have the game made in this location or what have you. Basically a patchwork, and nobody's happy in that situation because you didn't do what you set out to do. And the people who are going, sorry.
No,
you,
I was
you
just
get what I mean, right?
Yeah, exactly. I was going to bring up that point, but you just did it. Is like you're wasting so much time and resources in the end, and you're trying to be authentic, and then in the end, you basically just self-sabotage yourself.
Exactly. But if you just had a few conversations at the very beginning and before realizing that you're like going on the wrong path, you could have prevented all that, and you could have gotten exactly what it is that you wanted to set out to do, which you had good intentions from the very beginning. So like, don't ruin that by not including people earlier in the process. It's pivotal.
All right, now a slight change or different direction here. What if people? I think it's a hard thing to address, and it's obviously a case by case thing. But let's say people made that thing and they're like, "Oh shoot, I made this mistake now." Are there any good ways to kind of to rectify that, or just keep it on the forefront for next time that happens?
That's going to be case by case, of course. In some situations, you can patch up, or as I mentioned, it's not the ideal situation. Nobody wants to be in that situation. But sometimes you could omit a thing or cut something out and just be like, okay, you know what? This person is American now. They have this ancestry, and that's why their accent is not what you would expect. And it's a cop out. It's not great. But it's better than doing the other thing and misrepresenting a nation in one way or in the other, or casting someone who really has no business being cast in that role. It might be better to just rewrite it if it fits. But that's something you're going to have to discuss with a consultant too, on a case-by-case basis, because sometimes the patchwork is even more offensive.
Right.
Where like, really, you think we're all the same? Like you hired a voice actor. Like, okay, well, one of the examples that I see in TV all the time, I'm seeing a little less and less now, so I'm happy about it, is oftentimes people from Southeast Asia are cast in Arab roles. And like, if you think of Saeed from Lost, Saeed is not Iraqi. I'm from Iraq, and he's presented as being Iraqi, and he's not Iraqi. I was super happy to have an Iraqi character on a TV show, and I kind of like, I toughed out that part. The other parts about the character that came later, where the violent associations that I didn't appreciate at all, were worse than him being cast by someone who's Southeast Asian. The same thing with Abed from Community. It becomes a pattern where you're like, really, like there's I love people from Southeast Asia. Like that's not the point I'm making here. It
Right.
would be equally bad if you were casting Arabs in place of people who are like from, like, let's say Miss Marvel came out and she was cast by an Arab instead of a Pakistani. That would have been equally bad. But like you're sending the messages that you just think that we're all the same, and we're not, or that you're not actually treating it with respect,
Yeah.
the subject matter with respect. That is a thing that's harder to fix. Once the character is cast and the show is out, how do you fix that? That's like there's no easy answer. You've made the mistake already, so
Yeah.
just don't make it worse, I guess, is the answer in that situation.
Yeah.
Like
No.
learn from the lesson, don't repeat it, but don't pile up on it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, you're right. You're gonna make things worse and stuff.
Yeah.
And I also love the idea about hiring a consultant. And one thing I was thinking, and this is top of my head, just an idea in terms of if people are looking to potentially do this, or and should be if that's where their focus is perhaps it could be worth reaching out to countries where they're if the what you're trying to represent is in a country that, let's say, doesn't necessarily have a thriving gaming industry, and they're looking to make that impact, but they don't just necessarily have the means to do so, but they're extremely passionate. I would say reaching because these communities, while there might not be as large as like areas like Montreal or some major cities in the U.S. or in Europe, reaching out to some of those communities too, and just you can easily, it might take some work, but usually find them, and then have someone who's not only like potentially making games or looking to get into that area with you, but like I just think it's just another great way to get a perspective from both sides, one from the game dev side of things potentially, or something relating to that, and then and the other in terms of being more authentic with what you're doing. So
Absolutely. And there are a lot of, like, I mean, the internet is wide open to everyone. And
right,
oftentimes just by asking this question and asking people to retweet you, you'll find what you need. But if you need a little bit pointer in that in a more targeted direction, you could reach out to the IGDA. They have communities all
right,
over the
yep,
world. If you're looking for like representation in Pakistan or Iran, as an example, or anywhere, like really, they have like in Jamaica or in in Peru, etc. All these places have game dev communities, and they're looking oftentimes to connect with people all over the world. So it's not an uphill battle like you would necessarily imagine, and everything's within reach. You just have to put into that first step, right?
yeah,
Make that effort.
absolutely. All right, cool. Well, I think this focus here on in terms of really understanding things that are real and relatable and stuff is a really now a good segue to kind of talk a little bit more about best way to serve and market to some of these like communities and cultural niches. So
Absolutely. There's a really good example, a recent example that I would like to highlight. There's a League of Legends mobile spinoff called Wild Rift. I don't know if you've heard of it.
mm-mm.
This is the best example of localized advertising I've ever seen targeted at the Middle East. It's a video that you could find on YouTube, or an ad that you could find on YouTube, where you have three Arab women, like mothers, they're having coffee together. Three from three different areas. I noticed a Syrian, a Gulf, and a Lebanese accent. So they're not even from the same country, and they're sitting down and having coffee and discussing their kids. This is actually a very strong trope in the Middle East. We laugh about it all the time, where mothers compare their kids, like, "Well, my son does this and my son does that." It's relatable, and it exists outside of the Middle East as well. But
Yep.
in the nuance and the way they handled it, and the way they brought it was so well done. It felt like an Arabic, soap opera. And the first woman says, "So my son, he's in his second year studying space, or he's going to go to Mars one day, that kind of thing."
Yeah.
And the second mother says something, "Well, my daughter, she just got accepted in medical school in France and she's going to go there." And the third woman says, "Well, my son, he reached challenger rank in Wild Rift." And the other two women are like in disbelief. They're like, "You're not serious?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm serious." And she shows them on the phone, and you could see their jealousy on their faces. It's intense. They're like that. Like it's hilarious. It's really topical. It kind of can be understandable anywhere in the world. Like mothers brag about their kids everywhere,
Right.
but it was so localized and targeted in the nuance of speech, in the way, like, you look at around the room. This could have taken place in pretty much any house in the Middle East. It was so well done, and they really understood their target audience. This could not have been a better, they could, like, ad. And it's the first time I've seen it. It made me smile. Like, how many times do you replay ads intentionally?
Yeah,
That's
it's
how
not
good it was.
often.
Where I was like,
Yeah.
yeah. So they did it. It was a huge success. I saw it because I'm part of a lot of different game dev channels, specifically around the top, like around Middle East as well, because we stick together. We talk to each other. We help each other out. I'm part of a podcast called the Habibis. We have a Discord. I see it there. I'm in like different Facebook groups, and it was wildly distributed and discussed. Like, look, we got an ad, and it represented
Mm,
us well, and it's hilarious. It's actually entertaining to watch. That's a success story that I would say people need to learn to emulate. It really felt like it was for us and understood us.
yeah. And I love that example too. And I mean, because a few things. One, at a very high level, it can be relatable to various different cultures from a broad perspective, right? But then the fact that they dialed in a little bit more, so it really catered to that specific audience. And I mean,
Yes.
and and just your initial reaction, and then obviously everybody within your groups and communities, what was it? You smiled. Like,
Yes.
that's making an impact, right? So, like, like you said, they hit everything right on the right area, all in the right areas. And even if they let's say, even whether if there were subtitles or anything depending on different languages, it could still be relatable. Now,
And there
executing.
were, by the way, there were English subtitles for people who wanted to
Okay.
understand. Yeah,
But
absolutely.
and again, like, this could take some serious thought and everything, but I think that example specifically is a great one to consider. And it's like, well, how do you apply this in different ways? Like, hey, I'm making a Reddit post or whatever. I'm not going to make a whole video ad, and something like that. And that's okay. But I think what it comes down to again is I hope I'm not beating a dead horse here, but knowing your audience and
Mhm.
looking at how you can do that. And in a way, if you break down what we just did, with that ad, it's what can I do in a broad appeal, but then let's take it a step further, and what can I do on a more focused appeal. So you take your one main approach and then see what you can do to approach it from a different perspective. And that might mean, for whatever reason, in this case, they were able to execute it in just about anywhere, right? But
Yes.
but that may mean that you might have to tailor some messaging that you're using in one area to another, so you can really hone in and focus on those communities, those audiences a little bit better. I mean, that's why, like, very simple, basic example is localization, right? That's another way to view it as. But the other thing that I love about this too, and which is, I think, a problem that people have when it comes to strategy, more specifically with tactics and such, is at the core of what this was, it was simple. It wasn't overcomplicated or anything like that.
Mhm.
It was just very simple, and it was able to still execute on all those things. So I really love that example. I think I couldn't have think of a better example myself.
I'd love to share that link for anyone who's curious, in case they have a hard time finding it. I don't know if you have show notes on the
Yep,
podcast,
I'll
but
have show notes. So if you guys
excellent.
want to see that example, please visit the show notes page, and we'll include that there. No, so yeah, thank you for that. So one thing I want to say too, kind of in light to that and everything else we've been talking about, in terms of really understanding, how to serve these audiences, what's the right approach and stuff. Now, by taking these steps and measures to serve these cultural communities, what do you feel will be the overall residual impact that they can ultimately have on our global gaming culture?
So the first thing is, doing this successfully is going to create bridges between cultures, because basically video games are shared experiences, whether they're
Mm,
multiplayer or single player games. They're shared experiences regardless. Even like with multiplayer, I don't have to explain it. You're literally playing with people like around the world.
yep.
But with single player games, you're part of it. You become there are talking points. You'll understand the memes around it. You many times you'll join communities around it. So the more you reach out and have people experience games from different cultures, you're literally bringing humans together from all over the world. This is
Mm,
not even an exaggeration. And the other thing is, if you're in addition to that, you're representing these people within your games, which is part of it, right? It's not just about marketing to them, but it's also about representing them, so they see
right.
themselves in the games themselves, not just in the ads that make them want to buy it. You're going to be helping humanize people who have traditionally, at the very least, been othered. They're othered, and
Mm,
in some cases even vilified. They're like the people that you shoot at or you target.
right.
You're going to be helping humanize these people. This is like spreading empathy across the world just by including them, because it's not just the people from those backgrounds who are playing as these characters. In the case of the rosters, the example I bring up, that's easy, but there are other ways to do this, of course. But it's not just the people who want to see themselves representative that are having a positive impact. That are having a positive experience. It's others who fall in love with these other characters from these different cultures. That is a positive thing to that person who normally would not be subjugated to that. So that's a beautiful thing in and of itself. And finally, you're also educating people about the realities of different parts of the worlds and breaking down stereotypes if you're doing it well. If you're not just leaning into stereotypes, if you're actually representing people properly, these stereotypes fall apart really
Mm,
quickly. And you're starting to build a real understanding for who the people are and the nuances. You're not presenting them as monolithic entities, but really as individuals, and you're not representing their environments or their stories or whatnot in a very narrow-minded way, but more in an open way. And you'll see how, like, you'll help people understand how much we have in common and even the differences between us, and that's just a good thing. So this isn't only about marketing brands, which is a positive thing. I'm not saying it's a negative thing. Marketing, the example I gave with the video of the mothers, that's a positive thing. Market, like, people want to be thought of and catered to, but that's not all it is. It doesn't stop there.
right.
It's really about bringing people together to have these shared experiences and to have better representation and understanding across the board. Everything is linked. Everything's connected.
Yeah, and more, and it's gonna become more prominent too, because like, I mean, we live in a world today that it's so interconnected with, like, technology and everything else. But at the rate the gaming industry is going, it's just gonna keep growing and growing, and it's already part of our global culture. It's just gonna be more than that. So, and and this is something I've always felt is going to be the case too. It's again, like, going back to that first question we were talking about. It's just more important than ever to just be mindful of that. Is like, everyone listening, what you're doing today, and what you're doing in the future is going to have an impact on other people. You know that, right? But like,
Mhm.
it's going to go well beyond what you probably initially thought. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not a year from now, but it will have an impact. So again, like, all of you as creators are the ones who are kind of like doing this on whatever scale or whatever perspective that you're approaching this. So yeah, it's just really cool to know and understand this, and to, again, what kind of impact we're all creating as as creators, essentially.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that was awesome. A lot of cool stuff that we got out of there. Before we close, though, I'd love for you to share maybe quick 3 tips, kind of like a little recap, if you will, of what you would suggest for people who are, really considering this in terms of in their game development, or how to approach things appropriately, and also being authentic.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's start. Tip number one is listen, whether it's to the person within your team who comes from that background, if you're lucky enough to have one, or to consultants or any other experts. Listen, like, really don't think that you know better than these people. You don't. Point final. The second is pay special attention to tones and symbols as they relate to those topics, because even if there are experiences that you imagine to be 100% universal, and they may be, it's in the subtle details where you might be led astray, or you might make a mistake. Check everything with a focus group just to be sure. Even if it's just a cursory, hey, can you take a glance at this and see if I'm really going off the mark? Don't just assume, like, right? You
Right.
don't know what you don't know. And the third, I'm going to actually mention something I haven't mentioned earlier in the podcast, but I think it would be really important and relatable to the subject. For the topic of representing Muslims specifically, if you're so inclined, the topic of Ramadan, like the month of Ramadan,
Mm.
the Muslims basically celebrate, and other people who are not Muslim as well in that part of the world who celebrate once a year. Basically, it ended about 2 weeks ago, 2 3 weeks ago at this point, and very I could count on one hand the number of games that acknowledged it one way or the other.
Mm.
This is a huge missed opportunity. Ramadan is incredibly important to 1/3 of the world's population. Think about how big that is, and what a missed opportunity to acknowledge at the very least. And there's so many ways that you could do that in your games, and it'll show a huge demographic that you probably haven't even thought about, that you care about them. Like, just whatever it is that you do with other big holidays, consider doing the same. If you do that, consider doing the same with Ramadan, whether it's costumes or banners or targeted ads or what have you. Keep in mind that during Ramadan, people don't eat and don't engage in a lot of different activities, which actually usually means that they spend more time on in entertainment. Generally, they spend 50% more of their day, whether it's playing games or watching TV or doing whatever on the internet. So this is an opportunity for you not only to do the right thing and represent people who like. It's staggering. I really cannot count more than 2 or 3 games that acknowledge it at some level, and it's not off limits if you just do the right thing. It's like a lot of people advertise in Ramadan and have a Ramadan advertising. It's just like Christmas in so many different ways. Don't be scared to do it. It'll be well received, I promise you. And if you're nervous, you could reach out to me or to others and ask your questions. But this is an opportunity. This is a good starting point, and I think it's good practice before jumping into other things that are more subtle. So if you're looking for a starting point, I'd say Ramadan is your starting point. You have
Yeah.
a year to prepare. You have another 11 months.
And and I absolutely love that you brought that up too, because one area, and to be quite frank with everybody here, I was a little bit not that I don't think anyone listening would do this, but at one point I was thinking about like preparing some questions around the opportunities that exist like this, but sometimes I also want to make sure that, and we definitely covered it today, that you're not looking at it just simply for the sake of an opportunity. You're looking at it, like you said, approach it right and everything, and it's and as long as you're doing that, it's not off limits. And you just clearly identified one, and there's so many other opportunities out there where it just, again, know your audience, cater to that audience. I mean, who knows what could happen out of that, but as long as your intentions are pure and authentic and everything, there's no reason why you wouldn't be rewarded for that. I would find,
100% agree.
yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I was a little reluctant, because I'm like, I don't want to make this sound like, yeah, let's target all these audiences with our games, and because that's not what it's about.
Yeah.
A small portion compared to the bigger thing is understanding, having empathy, and everything else. Awesome.
100%.
So thank you so much for those tips, and now that we're closing, first and foremost, though, I'd love for you to share ways people can reach out to you if they want to, or find out more about some of your communities, or what's the best way people can get in touch.
Well, the main way, I'm actually pretty active on Twitter. I'm at Osama Dorias, so OSAMADORIAS. My DMs are usually open. Sometimes I close them when they get really, really full. But in general, if you at me, I will respond. So that's the main and best way. I do have a website. I don't really keep up with it as much, and I don't really share my email publicly so much. So yeah, reach out on Twitter, and don't be shy. I don't bite.
Yeah, and at the very least, you should follow, because some of the stories he shares about your kids and stuff are absolutely hilarious. If you have kids, you need to at the very least follow Osama on Twitter, because they're hilarious, and
Thank you.
it, oh,
Trip
they're
off the
just,
old block.
yeah, like the stuff your daughter says is priceless, and then it reminds me of how crazy mine is too. So, anyways, well, Osama, thank you so much for being on the show today. Really appreciate the insights and things that you shared on this subject. It's been an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. The honor and pleasure is all mine. Have a very good day, Andrew.
Thanks, you too. Hey everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of Indie Game Movement. I'm Andrew Pappas, your host, and the show's producer is Mustafa Price. If you enjoy and value the show's content, you can support us even more by going to Patreon and visiting www.patreon.com/IGM podcast and select the tier that best suits your needs. Show notes for this episode can be found by visiting rengenmarketing.com, the number episode of the show. Rengen Marketing is a consulting marketing company that helps indie devs with their marketing efforts. Whether you need guidance with your game's marketing strategy or could use a free marketing plan template, then please visit www.rengenmarketing.com and take action. A special thanks to Dakota Saw for Season 2's opening theme and Melissa Gellis for the new logo design. And as always, thanks for being such great listeners, and we'll see you next time on Indie Game Movement.